Hey everyone, and welcome back to the Deep Dive. Especially if you are a brand new listener and maybe thinking about taking the UPSC exams,
Oh, excellent.
you've come to the right place. Make sure to hit that subscribe button and the bell icon so you don't miss out on future episodes.
Yes, definitely. We don't want you to miss out.
Today we are diving deep into the economic landscape of India after independence.
It's a fascinating story.
It is really fascinating, full of twists and turns, and really crucial for understanding, how India got to where it is today.
Absolutely.
So where do we even begin with a story as massive as this?
Well, I think a good starting point is acknowledging the immense challenges that India faced right at the outset of independence. Poverty, widespread illiteracy, and you can't forget the legacy of colonialism,
Oh, absolutely.
which really depleted its resources.
Yeah, it's like starting a race, but with, a huge weight on your shoulders.
Exactly.
And right off the bat, India had this crucial decision to make. Like, what path should its economy take? Capitalism, socialism, or maybe something in between?
And what's interesting is that at the time, there wasn't a lot of support for a full-blown capitalist system like, say, the United States.
Why is that? What were people's concerns with that?
Well, you have to remember the historical context. Many leaders and thinkers back then were worried that going full-on capitalist would just make the existing inequalities even worse.
Right.
And they had just come out of colonial rule,
Right, yeah.
which often, prioritized profit over people. So they were really searching for a system that could uplift the masses and create a more equitable society.
So what was the solution? What path did they end up taking?
Well, India chose a really unique path. They opted for what's called a mixed economy model. It's this fascinating blend of capitalist and socialist principles.
Okay, wait, hold on. For those of us who aren't, economics whizzes, could you break down what a mixed economy actually means? What does that look like?
Sure. Think of it as a balancing act. The government has a pretty significant role, in planning and regulating the economy,
Hmm.
especially in key sectors. But at the same time, private enterprise is encouraged, allowing for, competition and innovation.
So it's not like a black or white situation.
Well, yeah.
A bit more of a gray area, right?
Yeah, exactly. It's all about finding the right mix, the optimal balance between state control and those market forces.
Yeah.
And India's approach was especially interesting. They were really aiming for this socialist pattern of society within this mixed economy framework.
Now that sounds intriguing. What does that actually mean, practically speaking? How did that play out?
Well, essentially, it meant that while private businesses were allowed to operate, the government also took steps to, promote social welfare, reduce inequality, and make sure that the benefits of economic growth were reaching all parts of society, not just a select few.
I see, yeah. I can definitely see the appeal of that, especially for a newly independent nation that's striving for both, economic growth and social justice at the same time.
Right.
But I'm curious, were there any downsides to this approach, to this
No.
mixed economy model?
Of course, every system has its pros and cons.
Right.
One of the challenges with India's mixed economy was that it sometimes led to, well, bureaucratic hurdles and inefficiencies.
Ah, yes. The infamous license Raj. I think we've all heard stories about this complex web of regulations and permits that businesses had to navigate
Exactly.
and how it really stifled growth.
It's a prime example of how, even well-intentioned policies can sometimes have unintended consequences.
Oh, for sure.
It was initially put in place to, regulate industries and protect domestic businesses.
Yeah.
But it ended up becoming a breeding ground for corruption and just tons of red tape.
So it's almost ironic, right? The very system that was meant to guide and control the economy ended up kind of holding it back in a way.
That's one interpretation for sure.
Right.
You have to remember, this was a period of experimentation for India. They were trying to find their own unique path, drawing from both the capitalist and socialist models. And as with any experiment, there were going to be some hiccups along the way.
It makes sense. Now, speaking of experiments, India also adopted a system of 5-year plans to kind of steer their economic development, right?
That's right. These 5-year plans were really a central feature of India's economic planning. They outlined the government's priorities,
Right.
and they set specific targets for different sectors like agriculture, industry, infrastructure, and so on.
So it's like having a roadmap for the economy.
Yeah.
Like a blueprint for where they want it to go.
Precisely. For example, the very first 5-year plan put a huge emphasis on agriculture.
Okay.
The aim was to boost food production and achieve self-sufficiency.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
What about industrial development? Was that a focus in those early plans?
Absolutely. The second five-year plan, which is also sometimes called the Mahalanobis Plan, marked a shift towards rapid industrialization.
Okay.
The focus then was on building heavy industries like steel, power, machinery, that kind of thing.
Right, yeah. Building that industrial base is often seen as a key for economic growth.
Exactly. The idea was to create a foundation for self-reliance and reduce dependence on imports.
So India was basically aiming for both agricultural self-sufficiency and industrial strength,
Yes,
a kind of two-pronged approach to development.
you got it. And it's important to note that these five-year plans weren't static. They evolved over time,
Right.
adapting to changing circumstances and shifting priorities.
So what were some of the big themes that emerged, the common threads that ran through these plans?
Well, you see a constant emphasis on self-reliance, industrialization, and social equity. Those were really the pillars of India's post-independence economic vision.
And looking back, did they manage to achieve these goals? What were some of the standout successes from this period?
I mean, there were some remarkable successes, wouldn't
Yeah.
you say?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, for one, the Green Revolution comes to mind. It completely transformed India from a nation that was struggling with food shortages to one that was largely self-sufficient in food grains.
It was a game changer.
Oh,
A real testament to India's ability to, embrace new technology and improve agricultural practices.
and it has such a profound impact, on millions of Indians, ensuring food security and really boosting rural incomes.
For sure. And this period also saw a significant expansion of the public sector, with the government taking a leading role in building infrastructure and promoting industrial growth.
So that mixed economy model that we talked about was really in full swing during this time.
Yes.
But as with anything, I'm sure there were some challenges that emerged along the way as well, right?
Right. As we touched upon earlier, that license Raj that we talked about, it really did create a lot of problems. The excessive regulations and just bureaucratic hurdles started to stifle entrepreneurship and hindered innovation.
And did this contribute to other economic challenges?
It did. All those inefficiencies stemming from the license Raj, led to low investment efficiency.
I mean,
So a lot of capital was being invested,
okay.
but it wasn't generating the desired level of output.
Right, like putting in all this effort,
Yeah.
but not getting the results you're hoping for.
Exactly. And this, coupled with a growing fiscal deficit, was starting to paint a worrying picture. The government was spending more than it was earning, and the economy was definitely showing signs of strain.
So it sounds like the perfect recipe for a crisis.
Hmm.
Did these challenges eventually lead to, like, a turning point in India's economic journey?
You're absolutely right. These mounting challenges, along with a balance of payments crisis in the late 1980s, kind of forced India to really rethink their economic policies.
So the stage was set for a major shift, a new chapter in this whole story.
Precisely. And that new chapter, which we'll delve into in the next part of our deep dive, came in the form of those landmark economic reforms of 1991.
Oh, yes. The era of liberalization, privatization, and globalization. A period that would fundamentally reshape India's economic landscape. But we'll save that fascinating story for part 2 of our deep dive. Welcome back to our deep dive into India's economic journey. If you're just joining us, we highly recommend catching up on part 1 to get the full picture.
Yes.
But as a quick recap, we talked about the challenges India faced after gaining independence and how they adopted this unique mixed economy model.
A blend of socialist and capitalist principles.
Exactly. And we saw how the license Raj, while well-intentioned, ended up creating obstacles for businesses and hindering growth.
It became quite a tangled web.
It did. And now get ready, because we're stepping into a truly pivotal moment in India's history. The economic reforms of 1991.
This is where things get really interesting, especially for our UPSC aspirants out there.
Oh yeah, this is big stuff.
So picture this. By the late 1980s, India is grappling with a severe economic crisis.
Okay.
Decades of protectionist policies, those aimed at shielding domestic industries.
Right.
Well, they had led to inefficiencies, and the government's finances were in a pretty precarious state.
Oh.
The balance of payment situation was dire.
Mean.
Basically, India was spending way more on imports than it was earning from exports.
I see. Not good.
Not good at all. Foreign exchange reserves were dwindling rapidly. It was a do-or-die situation. India had to make some drastic changes to get back on track.
So that's where the 1991 reforms come in. They were like a lifeline, a bold response to this crisis.
Exactly.
Yeah.
A complete overhaul of the existing economic model.
Okay, let's break it down. What exactly did these reforms involve?
Well, they're often referred to as the LPG policy. Liberalization, privatization, and globalization.
Okay, LPG. Got it.
The goal was to dismantle the infamous license Raj, open up the economy to foreign investment, and really integrate India into the global market.
It sounds like a complete 180-degree turn from their previous approach.
It was a huge gamble, a leap of faith.
Wow.
But it was also a recognition that the old system just wasn't sustainable anymore. India needed to adapt to the changing global landscape and unleash its true economic potential.
So did it work? Did the reforms deliver on their promises? What happened?
Well, it's a bit of a mixed bag.
As with most things, probably.
Exactly. On the positive side, we saw a resurgence in GDP growth. Foreign investment started pouring in.
Okay, that's good.
And several sectors, particularly IT and services, witnessed a boom. The fiscal deficit also improved as the government reduced its role in certain areas.
Sounds encouraging.
It was, but, we did mention mixed results. There were some negative consequences as well.
Right, there always are.
Some industries, for example, really struggled to compete with this new wave of global competition.
Yeah, I can imagine.
And that unfortunately led to job losses and economic hardship for certain segments of the population.
So as we said, winners and losers.
Right.
What about the impact on poverty and inequality overall? Did the reforms help uplift the masses, or did they make things worse?
That's the complex question, isn't it? Poverty rates did decline in the post-reform period, but the pace of that decline varied greatly across regions and social groups.
I see.
Some argue that the reforms disproportionately benefited the already affluent, widening the gap between the rich and the poor.
Yeah, it's a debate that continues to this day. So, did the reforms ultimately succeed in transforming India's economy?
I think it really depends on how you define success.
Sure.
The reforms undoubtedly unleashed a wave of economic growth and propelled India onto the global stage.
That's for sure.
But they also created new challenges.
Right.
And in some cases, exacerbated existing inequalities.
So a complex legacy, as we've been saying. A story with both bright spots and shadows.
Precisely. And it's crucial to understand these nuances, to look beyond those simplistic narratives of success or failure.
Yeah.
The 1991 reforms were a turning point, no doubt, but they're just one chapter in a much larger story.
And that story continues to unfold. Now, before we move on to the post-reform era, I want to zoom in on a few specific developments mentioned in our source material. The PL 480 program, for example, sounds intriguing.
Ah, yes. The PL 480 program, also known as Food for Peace, was initiated by the United States back in the 1950s.
Okay.
It provided food aid to India, primarily in the form of wheat.
A lifeline, perhaps, for a nation grappling with food shortages at the time.
It was. But it also underscored India's dependence on foreign aid and the need to become self-sufficient in food production.
And that's where the Green Revolution comes into play.
Exactly. The Green Revolution, as we discussed earlier, completely transformed India's agricultural sector.
It did.
Leading to a dramatic increase in food grain production.
Right, but our source material also mentions the public distribution system, or PDS.
Yes.
How does that fit into this picture?
The PDS is a government-run program that provides subsidized food grains to the poor and vulnerable.
Okay.
It's been a vital safety net, especially during times of scarcity.
So it works in tandem with the Green Revolution, ensuring that the increased food production actually reaches those who need it most.
That's the idea. The PDS has played a significant role in improving food security and reducing malnutrition in India.
Now, shifting gears a bit, our source material also mentions the abolition of the privy purse.
Right.
Can you shed some light on what that was all about?
So, the privy purse was a payment made by the Indian government to the former rulers of princely states after independence.
A sort of compensation for giving up their kingdoms.
In a way, yes, but the abolition of the privy purse in 1971 was a significant step towards social and economic equality.
I see.
It symbolized the dismantling of an outdated feudal system
Right.
and the affirmation of a more egalitarian society.
Makes sense. And finally, we can't talk about post-independence India without mentioning Indira Gandhi's iconic slogan, Garibi Hataao, remove poverty.
Absolutely. Garibi Hataao really captured the aspirations of a nation striving to eradicate poverty and uplift the masses.
There's a powerful message.
It resonated deeply with the people and became a rallying cry for social and economic progress.
It's a reminder that economic development isn't just about numbers and statistics. It's about improving people's lives.
Exactly. And as we move into the next part of our deep dive, we'll explore how India's economic policies have continued to grapple with that challenge.
Right, balancing growth with equity. It's an ongoing process.
It is.
Welcome back to the deep dive. We've been on quite a journey through India's economic landscape, haven't we?
We have. from those early challenges at independence to the game-changing reforms of 1991.
Exactly. Now, in this final part, let's step back and analyze the impact of those changes. Really address those burning questions that our listeners, especially those gearing up for the UPSC exams, might have.
Sounds good.
All right, let's tackle the big one head on. Did the 1991 reforms truly live up to all the hype? Were they a success or a failure?
Ah, the million-dollar question. And like most things in economics, the answer isn't a simple yes or no.
Right.
The reforms definitely had a positive impact on a number of fronts. We saw that surge in GDP growth, the fiscal situation improved,
Yeah.
and India became much more integrated into the global economy.
All significant achievements for sure. But let's be real, our sources also highlight some downsides.
Of course. Globalization, while opening up new markets and opportunities, also brought in intense competition. And some industries just couldn't keep up. And that, unfortunately, led to job losses and economic hardship for some.
So, as we've said before, there were winners and losers in this process.
Absolutely.
What about the impact on poverty and inequality overall? Did the reforms help to uplift the masses, or did they actually worsen existing disparities?
That's a really important question, and the data paints a rather complex picture. Poverty rates did decline in the years following the reforms,
Okay.
but the pace of that decline varied significantly across different regions and social groups. There's an argument to be made that the reforms disproportionately benefited those who were already well off,
Right.
which could mean a widening of the gap between the rich and the poor.
Yeah, it's a debate that's still ongoing, a reminder that the reforms weren't some magic solution to all of India's socioeconomic problems.
For sure. It's important to see those 1991 reforms not as a single event, but as part of this ongoing process, ongoing process of economic transformation.
It's all about adapting, learning, and making those necessary course corrections along the way. And speaking of course corrections, what are some key lessons that India can take away from its post-independence economic journey as a whole?
One of the biggest takeaways, I'd say, is the importance of finding that balance, that sweet spot between state intervention and those market forces.
Yeah.
A purely state-controlled economy can stifle innovation,
Right.
while an unfettered market can lead to inequality and social unrest.
Finding that balance is key.
Exactly. It's about creating an environment where both the government and the private sector can contribute to both economic growth and social well-being.
And that brings us to a final thought-provoking question for our listeners. How has India's journey since independence, this whole economic roller coaster, shaped its current economic standing? And what are the key challenges and opportunities that lie ahead?
India today stands as a major player in the global economy. It's a testament to the resilience, the ingenuity, and the hard work of its people.
Definitely.
But this journey is far from over.
That's for sure.
We still face issues like poverty, inequality, unemployment.
And climate change.
Right. These are complex challenges that require innovative solutions and a collective effort from everyone.
But there's also immense opportunity.
There is. India has this young and vibrant population, a growing middle class, a dynamic entrepreneurial spirit. It's really about harnessing that potential, investing in education, promoting innovation, and creating an environment where businesses can thrive.
The road ahead won't be easy, but India has a history of overcoming adversity and coming out stronger. And that brings us to the end of our deep dive into the world of post-independence. India's economic development.
Phew.
It's been quite a journey. We hope this exploration has given you a deeper understanding of the historical context, the policy choices, the successes, and the challenges that have shaped India's economic trajectory, especially for our UPSC aspirants.
And for everyone, really.
Yes. This isn't just about memorizing facts and figures. It's about developing a true understanding of the forces that have shaped our nation's economy. So, keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep engaging with this really fascinating subject.
Thank you, as always, for joining us on the Deep Dive.
And don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell so you never miss an episode. Until next time, keep those knowledge gears turning.